In 2023, 25-year-old Bryan Altamirano-Solano was here in the United States from Nicaragua, hoping to build a better future while waiting for his asylum application to be processed. Unfortunately, his dreams of a better future were sadly cut short. In the early hours of May 15, 2023, Bryan was captured on surveillance at Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas, laughing and having a good time with two unidentified women. At some point, they made their way to Bryan's hotel room, and after that, he was never seen alive again. Later that morning, when he failed to check out, a housekeeper went up to check on him and was met with a disturbing scene. Inside his hotel room, Bryan was found dead from a single gunshot wound to the chest. Investigators quickly obtained surveillance footage that showed Bryan speaking with two women in the valet area around 2:14 a.m. Approximately 20 minutes later, another camera recorded the trio walking toward Bryan's hotel room. Less than 15 minutes after they entered his room, the same cameras captured the two women sprinting down the hallway with the bag Bryan was seen carrying 15 minutes earlier. Investigators later determined that the bag they had taken contained his wallet and other personal belongings. Detectives used social media to identify the two women, who are cousins, as 20-year-olds Erica Covington and Ariana Taylor. They were both arrested 2 days later and brought to the police station. When questioned, both admitted to being at Caesar's Palace that night, but Taylor claimed she did not recall meeting Bryan. Covington, on the other hand, stated that Taylor had first encountered him in the valet parking area and had communicated with him through a translation app on her phone before they all proceeded to his room. However, when asked about the events inside the room, Covington declined to answer and instead requested a lawyer. However, investigators would find all the proof they needed from Bryan's phone, which had captured some explicit videos of the trio in the room. Investigators also found a spent cartridge casing at the scene that matched a firearm linked to a domestic violence incident that Taylor had been the victim of a few days prior to the murder. However, authorities never confirmed which woman pulled the trigger. However, under Nevada law, individuals involved in a murder, whether they fired the weapon or not, can be charged equally if they acted together in committing the crime. In November 2024, both Covington and Taylor pleaded guilty to second-degree murder as part of a plea agreement. 2 months later, in January 2025, they were each sentenced to 10 to 25 years in prison. Factoring in time already served, they will be eligible for parole in 2033. During sentencing, Covington expressed remorse and offered condolences to Bryan's family. Taylor, however, chose to remain silent. Bryan's parents, devastated by their son's tragic and senseless death, shared their grief in court, struggling to understand why his life had been taken in such a senseless act. Donna Oglive was born in the Philippines and later moved to Vancouver, British Columbia. At 24 years old, she relocated to Toronto, Canada, where she unfortunately got involved in prostitution. Struggling to survive on the city's streets, she found shelter in a temporary housing facility. However, just 5 weeks after her move, her life was tragically cut short. On March 9, 1998, Donna's body was discovered in a parking lot at the corner of Jarvis and Carlton Street. A neighbor who stumbled upon the horrific scene immediately alerted the police. At the time, the location was a large, open parking lot known for frequent sex trade activity. Donna, who was a mother to one child and pregnant with her second, had sadly been strangled to death, and her murder remained unsolved for the next 26 years. Investigators were able to collect DNA evidence from the crime scene, confirming the presence of an unknown male suspect. However, despite extensive searches in the National DNA Databank, no match was found. In 2022, investigators enlisted the help of Othram and their forensic genetic genealogy team. From there, investigators were able to identify the suspect as Ronald Gordon Ackerman. At the time of the murder, Ackerman, who was around the same age as Donna, lived in the area where her body was found. Over the years, he moved between Scarborough, Ontario, Fort McMurray, Alberta, and Gander, Newfoundland, where he was eventually located. On February 6, 2025, He was arrested and charged with first-degree murder and is currently in custody awaiting trial. Gregory William Giannonatti was born on June 22, 1958, in Lemon, South Dakota, to Bill and Beverly Giannonatti. In 1963, his family relocated to Deer Lodge, Montana, where he embraced the rural lifestyle. Greg graduated from Powell County High School in 1976 before earning a bachelor's degree in civil engineering from Montana State University. He later pursued a master's degree in civil engineering from Brigham Young University, graduating in 1987. His career began with Utah's Department of Transportation before he moved to Northern California in 1991. There, he worked as a principal engineer for the city of Roseville's wastewater treatment plant and maintenance operations division until his retirement. Shortly before his move to California, Greg was involved in a serious car accident that affected his short-term memory, a challenge he dealt with for the rest of his life. In August 2015, he suffered another devastating loss when his father, Bill, passed away on his 85th birthday. Around the same time, his mother, Beverly, discovered that a large amount of silver was missing from their home. She had been in the process of remodeling her late husband's house with plans to move back in. On October 19, 2015, a woman cleaning the home discovered a 25-pound gold bar estimated to be worth $480,000. 9 days later, on October 28, both Greg and Beverly vanished, along with the gold bar. 3 days later, a friend of theirs reported them missing. The following day, on November 1st, police conducted welfare checks at their homes and found both houses locked. At Greg's home, the television was still on and food was cooking in a slow cooker. Inside Beverly's home, her dogs, who require regular medication, had been left unattended for multiple days. As for Greg and Beverly, they were nowhere to be found, and there was no sign of a struggle in either home. If things couldn't get any stranger, the day after the welfare check, Greg's home was broken into, and several items, including a large-screen TV, were found scattered outside. Investigators began digging into Greg's and Beverly's lives and came across a 53-year-old handyman by the name of David Wayne Nelson, who had worked for them on various projects. When they looked into his past, they discovered he had a long history of criminal activity. He was brought in for questioning and confessed to stealing 17 ounces of silver from the family and selling it for $26,000 in Missoula, Montana. He then confessed to murdering both Greg and Beverly. He said that on the day of the murder, Greg confronted him about the theft, and Nelson responded by attacking him with a hammer and beating him until he was dead. He then eliminated the only witness, Beverly, by strangling her to death. He then disposed of both bodies off Old Stagecoach Road near Gold Creek. In November 2015, Nelson led investigators to the location where he had dumped their remains. The following year, in September 2016, he pleaded guilty to 2 counts of deliberate homicide and was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Investigators weren't done with Nelson yet and learned that his DNA matched to a murder victim by the name of Donna Mahar. Just after midnight on January 12, 1994, Donna was abducted while closing a family-owned saloon and casino in Montana City called Jackson Creek Saloon and was found murdered later that morning in the Colorado Gulch. The $3,300 from the saloon's register and gambling machines was never found. 2 men, Freddie Joe Lawrence and Paul Jenkins, were convicted of the murder in 1995 and sentenced to life in prison. However, in 2015, Montana passed a law allowing convicts to petition for DNA testing on case evidence. Subsequent tests on a rope found near Donna's body revealed her blood, along with DNA belonging to Nelson. Shockingly, the DNA did not link to either Lawrence or Jenkins. Nelson's own relatives later told investigators that he had confessed to killing Donna and had claimed responsibility for additional murders in Florida, California, Nevada, and Washington. With this new evidence, the Montana Innocence Project petitioned to have Lawrence and Jenkins' convictions overturned. On April 17, 2018, the men were released from prison after serving 23 years, and on June 1, 2018, the charges were dismissed. Some of the evidence in the original case was Jenkins' wife, Mary, who had bought clothes from a Dillard's in Helena using quarters that were taken from the Jackson Creek Saloon. She also confessed to witnessing her husband and Lawrence murder Donna, along with another man named Jimmy Lee. Then Lawrence and Jenkins painted their cars after the murder to conceal themselves from law enforcement. Lawrence's father-in-law was the one that turned them in, saying Lawrence confessed to the murder and implicated Jenkins. He was wearing a wire when the confession was allegedly made, but the recorder malfunctioned. It's unclear if the men will be retried now that they have physical evidence linking the murder to Nelson. Since Nelson is already serving a life sentence, it's unclear if he will be charged in Donna's murder. Regardless, law enforcement continues to investigate whether he may be responsible for more murders beyond those he has already been linked to. In November 1989, 23-year-old Mary Loucile Willfong, who had recently relocated from Colorado to Gainesville, Georgia, and was living in a boarding house, strangely went missing. On November 21, 1989, a deer hunter found her body near the Johnstonville Road interchange in Monroe County, not far from I-75. She had sadly been sexually assaulted and strangled to death. Investigators were able to identify her through fingerprints, and forensic analysis confirmed the presence of male DNA on her body. In 2023, investigators used advancements in DNA and were able to link the DNA to 59-year-old Larry Richard Paget, a truck driver living in Indiana. After the DNA match was confirmed, he was arrested and charged with her murder. Based on witness accounts, investigators believe that Mary encountered Paget at a farmer's market in Forest Park and got into his tractor-trailer with him. Once inside, he sexually assaulted her and strangled her to death before dumping her body near the highway. Facing charges of malice and felony murder, Paget pleaded guilty in March 2024 and was sentenced to life in prison. Unfortunately, there was little known about Mary at the time of her death. However, after a 35-year wait, her family is grateful to finally have some long-awaited answers. On February 26, 1999, a boy's body was found near a wooded cemetery near the Clifton United Methodist Church in Panthersville, Georgia. He was determined to be between 5 and 7 years old and had been deceased anywhere from 3 to 6 months, but the manner and cause of death could not be determined at the time. In July 2022, it was determined that the little John Doe was 6-year-old William DaShawn Hamilton. Soon before his death, he and his mother had recently moved from Charlotte, North Carolina. According to records, a tipster called the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children in May 2020 after an artist released a rendered image of the boy to the media. The woman living in Charlotte had known William and had been trying to figure out what happened to him because she had a gut feeling that something wasn't right for nearly 2 decades. She described him as a shining star with a keen sense of humor who liked to draw and read books like the dictionary and encyclopedia. Thankfully, she never gave up on trying to find answers to his whereabouts. In early 2022, DNA was collected from Teresa Ann Bailey Black to determine if she was the boy's mother, and indeed she was. As they dug into Teresa's past, they learned she used to work at the now-defunct strip club in Atlanta known as Pleasers, and may have been getting assistance from the Atlanta Day Shelter for Women and Children for a brief period. They also learned that she had been convicted of manslaughter in Charlotte, North Carolina, and served 1 year in prison from 1994 to 1995 before being released. An indictment claimed that in December 1998, Teresa withdrew William from school without notice and moved to Atlanta, Georgia. That following year, Teresa returned to Charlotte but arrived without William and provided several conflicting stories about where he was. He was never reported missing, resulting in him remaining unidentified for all these years. The indictment also states that she allegedly gave him cold medication containing diphenhydramine and acetaminophen and then hit him on the head with an unidentified object. She did not get him medical attention and reportedly covered up his death. When police questioned her in 2022, she initially acted surprised upon learning her son was dead. Later, she admitted to being present when William died and confessed to abandoning his body in the wooded location where he was found. She also told police that she had been struggling financially, was in a homeless shelter, and had left William in the care of another woman. On June 29, 2022, Teresa was arrested in Phoenix, Arizona, 23 years later, and charged with 2 counts of felony murder, 2 counts of cruelty to children, and 1 count of aggravated assault and concealing the death of another. In the end, a jury acquitted her of felony murder, child cruelty, and aggravated assault, but convicted her of concealing William's death. She was sentenced to 10 years in prison, the maximum penalty under Georgia law for that charge. Despite her conviction, many unanswered questions remain about what truly happened to William and why she chose to abandon him in the woods.